Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Mike Davies, and in today's tutorial I'll be showing you how to design this analog texture style poster using GIMP. I'll be using GIMP version 2.10.24, which is the latest version of GIMP at the time of this video. Before I get into that, don't forget to check out my website at daviesmediadesign.com. As always, I have tons of tutorials on here as well as free software help articles, so definitely check that out. You can get access to more content by becoming a DMD Premium member, and you can enroll in my GIMP 2.10 Masterclass from beginner to pro photo editing on Udemy, and I'll include a link to this as well as all the relevant links from this tutorial in the description of the video. I'll be using a bunch of free photos for today's tutorial, as well as some free assets. So I'll be using this photo here. I'll be using these film dust textures, so these are totally free. I will link this in the description. Click on the actual image itself here to download it. It's not totally apparent that you have to do that, but click on this and it'll start the download. I'll also be using this free font called Yeager. And I'll be using some images with some paper texture here, so I will include these. And this is the artist whose style I'll be emulating for this tutorial. So this is Benedicto Cernal III. I believe that's how you pronounce his name, but as you can see, he's got this sort of paper texture style, the black paper, and then he creates this outline text here, as well as you can see some color elements here. And of course, he adds text and logos and other things in here, so definitely check out his website for more of his work. So let's get started here on this poster design. So to start off, I'll go to File, New, and I went over here to inches and went with 18 by 24, which is a standard poster size. If you're gonna print this afterwards, go to Advanced Options and just set this to 300 ppi. It should already be in pixels per inch. In my case, I'm not going to print this, so I'm just going to keep this set to 72, and I'll come over here and click OK. So this has taken on the color of my background color right here. So what I can do is just reset my colors, and now I'm going to click on my foreground color swatch, and I do have a slightly off color black here, which I'll be using. So you can copy that HTML notation there, and I'll click OK, and I'll just drag and drop that there onto the background. Next, I'm going to navigate over to my downloads folder where I downloaded one of those paper textures, and I'm just going to click and drag this into my composition and release. So there is the paper. I'll hold Control zoom out. I downloaded the huge version of this. So I'll hit Shift S on the keyboard or come over here and grab the scale tool. And now I'm just going to click and drag one of these scale handles. If I hold Control, it'll scale from the middle, and if I hold Shift, it'll maintain the original aspect ratio. So I'm basically just going to shrink it down until it's about the same size of my composition. I can hold Control and zoom in with my mouse wheel if I want to be more precise, but I think this will be fine here, so I'll hit Scale. Once I've done that, I actually want to convert this more to a black color. So what I'll do here, because this is pretty much a white color right now, is go to Colors, Invert. So that's going to flip my colors there. So now you'll see it looks like a black piece of paper. I'll also go to Colors, Curves. And now I'm just going to play around with the curves until I get this nice and dark. So I'm basically just adjusting the top right and the bottom left point. And once I've done that, I can then create a little S curve, which is going to add contrast. So I'm just clicking and dragging to create points. So there you can see a before and after, and I'll click OK. Next, what I'll do is bring in my photo. So I'll come over here. This was the original photo I used, and yes, I do already have the selection placed here. Let me hit Control-Shift-A to deselect it. All I did here was I came over and grabbed my Paths tool, which you can grab using the B key. B stands for Bezier curve. And then hold Control, zoom in with the mouse wheel. All I did was I sat here and clicked to create nodes. If you click and drag, it'll create curved nodes. And I just clicked and dragged my mouse along the outline of the subject. I'm just doing it sloppily right now. But if I come over here to the Paths tab, you'll see this was the original one I drew, so I'll hold Control, zoom out. When you get to this part here, hit Shift and click, and that will keep the path along the same group here. So basically you'll still have this path and then Shift click to start a new path, but these two will be connected still. I do recommend checking out my Master the Paths tool tutorial if you aren't sure how to use the Paths tool. But now inside of my Paths tab, I'm just going to convert this path to a selection using the Path to Selection button. So I'll come back over here to my Layers panel. There you can see this is selected now. I'll hit Control C to copy that. And we'll come over here, Control V to paste. So the more time you spend cutting out your subject here, the better this is gonna look. But this will place this on a floating selection layer at first. So I'll come over here and just click to put this on its own new layer. And now we have our model here inside of our poster. If I hit Control Shift J, that'll center everything up. Next, what I wanna do is add some center guides. So I'm gonna go to Image, Guides, New Guide by %. And I'm going to set the direction to horizontal and the position to 50 and click OK. So that will create a center guide there. And to save time, I'm going to add another guide, but I'll hit Control Shift F to bring up the guides dialog here. And I'm just going to change this now to vertical and click OK. And I'll grab my move tool and I'm just going to move this. You can see a little crosshair there in the middle of my layer. And that just allows me to center this up. So I'm just going to loosely place this for now, a little bit above the exact center of the image. So next I'll come over here to this paper texture layer and let's actually rename this dark paper texture. So double clicking on the layer name allows you to rename it. Now I'll come over here and click to create a new layer. And I'm just going to name this circle, fill it with transparency and click OK. So I'll come over here to my toolbox, click and hold the second tool group and grab the Ellipse Select tool, which is the E key. And now I'm just going to click and drag my mouse. If I hold Control, it'll draw from the center. Hold Shift for a 1:1 aspect ratio. And you can make the circle as large or small as you want, but I'll release right there. So around 8:10 is the size. You could see that over here. And I'll just position this into place. And now I'm just going to click and drag this white color here from my background swatch, drop it in there, and now that has our white circle there. So I'll hit Control Shift A to deselect that. So next I'm just going to resize the model here. So I'll come back to the pasted layer. Let's rename this to model, hit the Enter key. So Shift S on the keyboard will grab my scale tool. And if this is my active layer, which it is right now, it'll allow me to scale this model layer. So let's just scale it down. Hold the Control and the Shift keys to scale from center and maintain the aspect ratio. I don't need to scale it that much, just a tiny bit. So right there, you can always reposition it using the little boxes in the center there. So I'll hit Scale. Next, what I'll do is just mask out the feet there. So to do that, I'm going to Alt-click on the circle layer. If Alt-clicking doesn't work, just click on the circle layer and go to Layer, Transparency, Alpha 2 Selection. And then we're going to go to Select, Shrink. We're going to change the units here to pixels and 20 pixels. Let's go 15 actually. That's probably fine. I'll click OK. So that's going to shrink the circle a bit there. So now what I'll do is hit Control I or go to Select, Invert. And if I hold Control and zoom in, you'll see the little part of the feet sticking out here. That's what we're going to erase. So I'm going to come over here to the model layer. I'm going to right click and go to Add Layer Mask. We'll make sure we go with white full opacity here. Make sure Invert Mask is unchecked and click Add. So now I'll grab the paintbrush tool from my toolbox and I'm just going to shrink the size of the paintbrush here to about there. Make sure my color is set to black and also making sure I'm on the layer mask. I'll hold Control and zoom in and I'm just going to paint out this area right here, just the feet. So let's make sure we don't paint out the dress. I did get some of the dress, but I also have not totally painted out the feet. So I can always hit the X key to switch over to white. And whenever I paint white on a layer mask, it's going to reveal what's on the layer originally. So right there, it's not perfect. You can spend some more time on that if you want, but I'll hold Control, zoom out. And I do like leaving the dress like that, so I'll hit Control Shift A to deselect that. Next, what I'll do is I'm going to click on this model layer and just duplicate it. So using the little duplicate icon, I'm going to right click on here and go to Apply Layer Mask. So that's going to merge the mask here on this layer. So basically it makes the change right here permanent. Then I'm going to turn this into black and white by going to Colors, Desaturate, Desaturate. And I'll just go with luminance, which is fine, and click OK. Now we're going to add a layer mask to this again. So right click, Add Layer Mask. We'll go white full opacity and click add. And now we're going to paint black wherever the dress is. That way everything will be black and white except for the dress, which is gold. So hold Control, zoom in. That's just going to allow us to draw more attention to the dress. Let's hit the P key on the keyboard to grab the paintbrush tool and swap the color over to black. And let's just increase the size here. And now I can paint, hold Control, zoom in with my mouse wheel. And you can increase or decrease the size of your brush using the left or right brackets on the keyboard. If you want to clean an area up like right here, I can hit the X key to switch over to white, and then anytime I paint white, it's just going to get rid of that area that we brought in. Hit the X key to switch back to black, hold Control, zoom in right here on the jewelry, and I'm going to use the left bracket on the keyboard to shrink the size of my brush, the right bracket to increase it again. Alright, so hold Control, zoom out. So now you can see the dress is in full color. I do want to tweak the color of the gold here because this gold isn't that bright. So I'll come over here to the original model layer. And I'm going to go to Colors, Colorize, and I'll come over here to the actual color. I've already picked this gold color out from earlier, so you can copy my HTML notation there to use that same color and click OK. You can also adjust the color after the fact over here. So let's say I wanted to increase the saturation slightly of that gold. I can do so here. So now I'll come over here and click OK. Next, let's add the main lettering in here. So in the original design, it says GIMP. So I'll come over here, grab my text tool. You can see my font is already set to Yeager. You can click on here and sort through the fonts if you want to find a different one. And I'm going to increase the font size. I believe I went with 500 to start. And I'm also going to swap my color so that white is the main color here. So now I'm going to click on my composition to create a text box, and with the caps lock key on, I'll type GI, and then I'm going to click down here and type MP. So let me just double click on here to select all the text. I do want to convert this text to bold text. You'll see there's a little box here called bold. I'm going to click on that box to make that bold, and also come up here to the other line of text and do the same thing. So we can't really read this text right now because obviously the circle is white and the text is white. So what I'll do is add my paper texture to this circle here. So first I'm going to scroll down to the circle layer, and then I'll bring up my downloads folder. So here is that texture. It's a different paper texture. I'm going to click and drag that here onto my composition and release. Shift S on the keyboard to grab the scale tool and just grab a random handle. Hold Control and Shift and just drag this down until you get the right size that you want here. So right there will be fine. I'll hit scale. Now I'm going to once again alt click on here. And now on the paper texture layer, I'm going to right click, go to add layer mask. And I'm just going to go with selection and click add. Hit Control Shift A to deselect that. So now we have a texture here and it's easier to read the text. So I'll grab the move tool and I'm just going to reposition my text. And I'm also going to need to change the order of the text because as you can see, this is going behind our model. So what I'll do is click on the first text layer and shift click on this up arrow. And then click on the second layer, shift click on the up arrow. That just brings this all the way to the top of the stacking order. And now I'm just going to line the text up so that it fits inside the circle and is also aligned with one another here. So I'm actually going to grab the text tool and just decrease the size of this. So let's go with, actually I think I went with 430 originally. So we'll do the same here. Grab the move tool and that should work. So I just lined it up where the I here lines up with the P. So once you have everything lined up, you can come over here to the top text layer if you have two text layers and just merge that down using this little merge icon. So now everything is on one layer. And now you can sort of click on this once and use your arrow keys on your keyboard to move things around. Once that's in position, we're going to come over here and create a new layer. And I'm just going to name this GIMP Outline. I still have my caps lock key on. So now I'm going to alt-click on the GIMP text. So once again, we have a selection area. Then I'll come over here to the Paths tab, and I'm going to convert this selection area to a path using Selection to Path. I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that, or go to Select None. And with my foreground color set to white, I'm going to come over here and just stroke this. And so I have it set to Stroke Line, Solid Color, Anti-aliasing is turned on, and the stroke width is set to 8. The line style is just your standard line. So now I'll come over here and click Stroke. So coming back to the Layers panel now, I need to do a couple of things to the text to get it styled the way I want. So first off, let's come over here to the original GIMP text. We're going to click this little lock icon to lock the alpha channel, and I'll hit the G key on my keyboard to grab the gradient tool. And I'm going to change this black color to the gold we used earlier and click OK. And making sure this is set to linear and the gradient type is set to foreground and background RGB. Now what I'll do is click and drag, and you'll see we'll get a cool gradient here. I'm going to drag this off the page a bit, off the layer I should say. So that looks pretty good. Once I'm ready, I'll hit the Enter key. So if the gradient doesn't fill in just the text and it fills in your whole layer, that means you didn't lock your alpha channel, so make sure you lock that. But once I'm done with that, I'm going to unlock the alpha channel, come over to one of the model layers, so let's go with this one here, and I'm just going to alt-click on the original photo. And then we'll come back up to the GIMP text layer, right-click, go to Add Layer Mask, and we're going to mask this to the selection, but we're going to invert the mask because we want to keep everything outside of the selection area. So now I'll click Add. And we'll do the exact opposite for the outline layer. So I'm going to right-click, go to Add Layer Mask, make sure selection is checked, and then uncheck Invert Mask and click Add. So that'll get rid of all the outlines that are outside of the selection area. And I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that. All right, so now let's add some of the smaller text that's around the poster. I had it saying free and open source software here. I had sort of a makeshift logo down here, my website, and then some information about the poster up top. So let's just grab the text tool, and I'll start with the Yeager text here. So I'm going to click up top here and type 20, hit the Enter key to start a new line, and then 21. Control-A will select all my text. I'm going to center justify this in the tool options. I'm also going to shrink this down. Let me hold Control Zoom out with my mouse wheel. So let's shrink this down drastically. And maybe about right there is fine. And now I'm going to grab my Move tool and hold Control, zoom in. So I'm going to move this up to the right corner. Right now there's not really any guides telling me where I should place things. So what I'll do is come over here and grab my Rectangle Select tool. I'm going to click and drag my mouse like so and release. And I'm just going to click and drag the selection area so that the center crosshair snaps to my center guides. And now what I'll do is go to Image, Guides, New Guides from Selection, and there you'll see we now have guides. I'll hit Control-Shift-A to deselect that, grab the Move tool again, so now we can just line the text up with that. So we've got this line of text here. Let's come over here, grab the text tool, click down here with the caps lock key on. For this, I just type DMD. I'll hit Control-A to select it all, obviously way too big. So let's go to 75 again. You can also make this bold if you want, once again using that bold button. And I'll grab the Move tool and we'll just move this down here. So now we're going to grab the text tool again. This time we're going to change the font to say, let me turn my caps lock key off, monospace. So I went with monospace bold, and we could decrease the size of the font here, probably just stick with 75. So the first line of text I'll put right here, and caps lock key back on, free and open source software. I'll hit Control-A to select all that, and let's change this. Let's go with 40. And I can either use the Move tool or just hold the Alt key, and that allows me to move my text. So maybe let's go with about right there. So we're going to add 2 more lines of text before we start adding some other design elements. So up top here, I just had it say, with the caps lock key on, analog, texture, hit the Enter key, poster. I'll hit Control-A to select all that. and we'll probably go with 40 again. And by the way, if you realize after the fact, like I'm doing here, that you want a different size text, all you have to do is come over here and change it inside the tool options, and the next time you create a new line of text, it will then have the same settings here. But now I'll come over here and justify this left, and hold Control, zoom in, and it looks like it's aligned pretty well, so we'll keep it there for now. And the last line of text will go down here. I'll just click once, and with the caps lock key still on, type daviesmediadesign.com. Hit the Enter key, turn the caps lock key off at Davies Media, DES. And if I hit Control A, it'll select everything. We'll justify it to the right. Hold Control, zoom in. Using the Alt key, we can move this. And now we have that in place. And I could probably decrease that to 30 and then hold the Alt key once again and move that in place. All right, so now I'm just going to change some of the coloring here. So let's come up top here to where it says Poster and hold Control, zoom out so we can see our little text editor. Click on the color and change that. We'll go with the gold color there. And it also increased the size. Let me just change that back. And the text tool in GIMP is kind of finicky. But now I'm going to select this text here. We'll change that color back to gold. And then come over here. And I'm just going to change this color to gold. And I'm also going to add a drop shadow here so that when it overlaps with the gold dress, you can read it better. So to do that, I'll go to Filters, Light and Shadow, Drop Shadow. And we're just going to decrease the blur here, the blur radius, and the opacity. I'm going to increase that, so I'll click OK. All right, so now it's time to add the final elements to this. So first what I'm going to do is add some boxes in here. So I'm going to drag a guide here from the ruler, drag another guide to about right here. So I'm on this free and open source software text layer. Let's create a new layer and just name this FOSS text underline. Hit the Enter key. Grab the rectangle select tool, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle between these guides. You can always hover over the handles to change the size, and you can also drag in the center to relocate it. So right there looks pretty good. So now I'm going to click and drag the gold color in here. And I'm just going to click and drag this lower and just eyeball it, probably about right there, and drag this in a little bit, probably right here, and just click and drag the white color. So I kind of did the same thing, but down here. So hold Control, zoom in. I'm on the same FOSS text underline layer. So let's come over here and create a new layer, and we'll just name this website box. Hit the Enter key, click and drag, and then drag the handle so that it snaps to that guide. And I'll just click and drag this gold color. Control Shift A to deselect that. So now we have a couple of graphical elements there. So to finish off, we're going to add some texture to this. So let's scroll up to the very top. We're going to click on our topmost text layer, which happens to be my website. And now we're going to open up the film dust textures. You do have to unzip these from a zip file. I went with 23 for this one, so I'll click and drag that and release. Hold Control, zoom out. So this is going to be horizontal to start with. So I need to scale it and rotate it. So the best tool to do both of those things is to come over here and grab the Unify Transform tool. So now we're going to click on here. And if I hover my mouse over the top left corner there and then drag, that's the rotate tool. If I hold shift, it'll rotate it in 15-degree increments. So right there I can release, and now this is going to be totally vertical. And if I hover over this first handle here, you'll see that'll change that to the scale tool. So click and drag. If I hold Control and Shift, I can drag it down and release. I'll hit Transform. Hold Control, zoom in. Obviously it's covering everything, so we need to get rid of the black. The easiest way to do that is to come over here, and we're going to change this to Screen. So that will only keep the white elements. And as you can see, that gives us some really cool textures in here. You can grab the Move tool and sort of reposition this if you want. I didn't leave much wiggle room just because of how small I scaled it, but that's fine there. So next I'm going to add noise, and I'm going to add noise to the model as well as the circle. So I'll scroll down here until we get to the model. and click on the black and white model. Then I'll go to Filters, Noise, RGB Noise. So you'll notice at first there's a lot of color noise in here. I don't really like that look. So I'm just going to uncheck all these options. And now we can just use the value channel or the value slider here, and you can add as much or little noise as you want. I'll just go with about right there and click OK. I also want to add it to the dress here, which is currently on a separate layer. So let's come over here, click on that layer and Control F. So that will repeat that noise. And let's also add it to the circle. So we only really need to add it to the texture since that's all we see. So I'll click on that texture layer and hit Control F. And now we just need to add the circle outline and the grid. So let's start with the circle outline. It's much easier. So I'm going to click on the circle, Alt click. So that creates a selection. We're going to click to create a new layer and name it Circle Outline. Hit the Enter key. Let's come over here to the Paths tab, and we're just going to click the Selection to Path option. That's going to create a path from our circular selection there. Control-Shift-A to deselect that. And with our color still set to white, I'll come over here and hit the Stroke option. We'll keep it set to 8 and hit Stroke. And coming back to the layers, I can hit the M key and I have to hover over the actual outline here, or if you don't want to have to deal with that, just go to Move the Active Layer inside the tool options for the Move tool. Make sure you're on the circle outline layer, and now it'll automatically move that since that's our active layer. So we're just going to drag it upwards a little bit. And lastly, we're going to add the little grid behind here, and we're just going to give it a sort of like space-time warping effect. So I'm going to come down here to the dark paper texture layer, click to create a new layer, and we'll name this grid. Hit the Enter key. We're going to use the / key on the keyboard or go to Help, Search, and Run a Command. I do have an entire tutorial dedicated to the search actions feature, but now I'm just going to type grid, and you'll see an option here called Grid Renderer. That's the one we're going to use, so I'll double click on that. And now what I'm going to do is change the color first off to a gray color, so like a dark gray, just like that, and click OK. And now I can adjust the size of this. You can make it as large or small as you want. I think I went with around 50 for this. And then you can also adjust how thick the lines are. So right now it's set to 4. You can go up as far as you want. Maybe we'll go with 6, and I'll click OK. So now I want to warp it so it looks like a warping in space-time or something. So I'll come over here and grab the Warp Transform tool, which is going to be the W key. You're going to increase the size of the paintbrush here for this tool. So you want it to be a pretty big size. And then you're just going to warp anywhere that you want to warp it. So you can just click and drag. And I have this set to move pixels, by the way. So just click and drag anywhere around the circle, really, until this looks the way you want it to look. So once you're satisfied with that, hit the Enter key. Now we're going to add a layer mask. So right click, add layer mask. We'll go with black full transparency. Make sure invert mask is unchecked and click add. That's going to hide everything. I'll hit the P key to grab my paintbrush again. We're going to increase the size of the paintbrush and make sure you have it set to a relatively low hardness. So in this case, I'm set to 50. That's going to give us a nice soft brush. And I'll increase the size there. I'm going to make sure my color here is set to white. And now on the layer mask for the grid, I'm just going to paint some faint areas here around the circle to bring in some of those warped areas. And you can always swap your color here, reset to black, and paint some of these areas out if you don't want this much grid. Hit Control-Shift-J to center that up, and there's our final design. Alright guys, that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and click the bell icon to be notified each time I have a brand new tutorial. You can check out any of the links to my resources in the description of the video. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.